Afternoon, everyone. My name is Laurie Watson, and I am the Director of Social Assistance and Employment Opportunities in the Niagara region. Welcome to our speaker webinar series, Working Together to Prevent and End Poverty and Increase Well-Being in Niagara. I want to take this opportunity to thank the 2025 Speaker Series signature sponsor, Enbridge Gas, for their support of OMSSA's webinar series. Owned by Enbridge Inc., Enbridge Gas is a Canadian-based leader in energy transportation and distribution. The Enbridge Gas Distribution and Storage business unit is comprised of 5 natural gas utilities that collectively provide safe, affordable, reliable energy to about 7 million customers in Ontario, Ohio, North Carolina, Quebec, Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho. I will begin this webinar with a land acknowledgement. The land on which OMSSA operates is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, and the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. OMSSA appreciates and acknowledges that many people participating on our webinar are based in communities across what has been deemed the Province Ontario, which is covered by 46 treaties and agreements. Thank you. Today's session, I'm going to offer a description. In March 2024, Niagara Region Council endorsed the Poverty Reduction Strategy, recognizing that the Regional Municipality of Niagara and many local providers already deliver service to lift people out of poverty. This strategy identifies best practices, uncovers gaps, and leverages local knowledge to inform future action. Diverse perspectives and experience shaped this community-led strategy, and over 1,000 residents informed the strategy, including people living in poverty and over 200 Indigenous people. During this session, our presenters will review the collective impact approach used to engage community and collaborate with many sectors to create the strategy. This will outline the strategy's areas of focus, recommendations, and actions. The presenters will describe the evaluation plan designed to measure the success and reflect on highlights from the first year of its implementation, including how the strategy has informed regional granting funding program. This presentation will be of interest for municipalities working to end poverty, whether you're thinking of creating a poverty reduction strategy or looking for ways to enhance existing efforts. You will leave with insights and inspiration to engage community, monitor success, and build collaborations that can work together to end poverty. It is now my true pleasure to introduce your presenters. First, Lisa Gallant. Lisa Gallant is our Poverty Reduction Advisor with the Niagara Region Community Services. In her role, she's helped develop Niagara's first official poverty reduction strategy and is working with interested parties and affected parties to implement the actions that you'll hear about in the strategy. Lisa brings skills in community engagement, program planning, evaluation, and policy development. She values the importance of strengthening community capacity to advance efforts aimed at ending poverty. And Mark Todd is a dedicated manager within community services with social assistance and employment opportunities. Since 2008, he has played the key role in overseeing the Niagara Poverty Reduction Initiative, a grant program designed to enhance prosperity for residents of Niagara who live in poverty. His commitment to addressing social economic challenges is reflected in his ongoing efforts to implement and advance the goals outlined in the Poverty Reduction Strategy. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation using the chat function. And at the end of the presentation, we will also hold time to answer additional questions. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to our presenters, Lisa and Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie, for the introduction. Very happy to be here today to share our journey. And we're going to put it in a perspective of journey, working together to prevent and end poverty and increase well-being in Niagara. But before I get into the presentation, I do want to talk a little bit about poverty.
Apologies for that, everyone. Just give me one moment to pull up the speakers in our screen.
Yeah.
Hey, Judith. Hello? Hello?
Are we back?
Hello?
Can hear you, Mark.
Yep, there we go. Sorry about that, everyone.
All good. Just want to make sure you guys can hear us.
We can.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
as I was saying, after the pandemic, we have seen inflation and we've seen a stagnation of social assistance and wages, and it has really devastated people who are living on low income. The average price of goods and services has risen more than 17% between 2019 and 2024. According to the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, an increase of 23% for food, 24% for transportation, 55% for gas if you're lucky enough to have a car, 24% increase in shelter, 16% increase for health and personal care. If you worked in retail in 2024, your annual wage increase was zero. And if you're on social assistance, your income increase has been zero since 2018. That's 7 years without an increase. And the people who have made these decisions, or the people who have the power to make these changes, their focus is mostly on addressing the effects of poverty. Homelessness and encampments, the opioid epidemic, increases in domestic violence, more crime, less healthy people, more hospital visits. These are the physical emanations or the abstract but perceptible things that originates from poverty. Poverty is always about money, but it's also not just about money. And that's what we heard when we went out and talked to people. Poverty is a relentless piling on of problems. Poverty is the condition of not having enough choices and being taken advantage of because of that lack of choices. If we really want to do something about poverty, we need government that will fix the social safety net, empower people by giving them more control and choice in their lives, rein in exploitations, and invest in broadening prosperity for everyone by making sweeping policy changes or social policy changes. All right, I'm going to get started with the presentation. We're going to start with a little poll. Rob, if you can pull up the poll. We'd like to get a sense of where everyone is. So, sorry, that's the second poll. So if we could do the first poll. Yeah, this is it. Sorry, not seeing it. So the question is, does your organization have a framework in place to guide staff on commute? No, this is the second poll. Sorry, Rob. Oh, and just got to change my screen.
There we go. Sorry about that, Mark.
Oh, that's all good. And I don't see the poll, but the question is, which of the following best describes your city or your region's status regarding the development of a poverty reduction strategy? Where we're trying to get a sense of is who else is on this journey, who else has taken this journey, who else is looking to take this journey. So, are you a region or a city that has a poverty reduction strategy already? Do you have plans to update an existing poverty reduction strategy? Do you have plans to create one? Or are you, or you don't have one, or you just don't know? And then we'll get those results. So today we're going to talk about Niagara's journey in creating a poverty strategy, which, as Lori mentioned, was released in March of 2024. We're going to talk about our starting point, what we did to create the strategy in motion, measurements, and finally, where it's brought us. What we will share is our journey, and our journey will usually have a beginning and an end, and it includes the path connecting them, along with the experiences and challenges and growth encountered along the way. Some of the parts included in a journey is usually things like the initial call to action, moments of testing, finding allies, facing enemies, and ultimately the destination and the lessons learned along the way, which is what we want to share with you. So I'm looking at the results of the poll. Nice to see the majority, 36%, you have a poverty reduction strategy, and 4% are looking at updating the strategy. And some of you don't have the strategy, so hopefully you're going to learn some things about that in the presentation today. Okay, Rob, do you want to go to the next slide? So our starting point, so our call to action, if you want to go to the next slide. So for context, for anyone who has never visited Niagara, it lies on the west side of the Niagara River between Lakes Ontario and Lake Erie. There are 12 municipalities. We are a two-tier government structure, regional and municipal. We have 12 mayors that are part of Regional Council. And the poverty strategy is a regionally created strategy, but it is also part of a larger configuration of work that is happening in each of the municipalities. We have a population of approximately 485,000 people in an area of over 18,000 square kilometers. And so for context, Toronto, which is Canada's largest city, is 630 square kilometers and has 7 million people. So we are a large geography with a relatively small and sporadic population. If you want to go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, a journey needs to have a starting point somewhere, and sometimes maps are provided. I'm going to talk about these documents a little bit. Beginnings can be somewhat ambiguous. So in our case today, we will say that in Niagara, our journey to develop this strategy began with a 2007 report titled A Legacy of Poverty, Addressing Cycles of Poverty and the Impact on Child Health in Niagara Region. This report led to the creation of the Niagara Prosperity Initiative, which is a funding program that invests $1.5 million annually in community projects that address poverty in Niagara. And since 2008, the NPI has funded 411 projects to almost 100 different agencies. A follow-up report was made in 2011 titled Building a New Legacy, Increasing Prosperity for Niagara Residents by Improving the Quality of Neighborhood Life, which provided further information about poverty in Niagara and further helped focus funding for NPI. And then in 2021, our local university, Brock University, was commissioned to evaluate and make recommendations on the NPI program and its impacts on poverty. They made 5 recommendations, and the one recommendation that we're here to talk about was they recommended to Niagara that we develop a comprehensive Niagara Region poverty strategy. At the same time, Brock's report came out. Niagara's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan came into effect, which also called for the development of a poverty reduction strategy. And the creation of a strategy was
just if they sat there for too long.
And the creation of a strategy was then included in Niagara Regional Council's strategic priorities under Equitable Region. And so all things coming together, Council approved that the work begin in 2022 to create a community-owned strategy. And I will now pass it over to Lisa to talk about that part of the journey. Thanks.
Thank you for setting the stage, Mark. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to start with the next slide and talking about community engagement. This was a critical part to the creation of our strategy. And through our community conversations, we heard from over 1,000 people, most of these people living in poverty and people who are usually underrepresented in research. Before I go on in this, I'm going to ask Rob to start our second poll, which you had a quick glance at already. And we're asking, does your organization have a framework in place to guide staff on community engagement? And the reason we wanted to ask this question is because Niagara Region has been working on a community engagement framework that we can use across the corporation in planning, in economic development, public health, and community services, and on, so that staff can use a consistent, coordinated, and informed approach when we go out to engage community. So curious to see if you have something similar in place. We're getting ready to pilot this across the corporation. A lot of our tools that we're referring to in community engagement that are in that strategy and that we've used as we created the poverty reduction strategy come from International Association for Public Participation, or known as IAP2, and also from Tamarack, which is a National Institute to End Poverty and brings people together to collaborate and build skills. So it looks like this is the end of the poll. We've got a good balance of some of you do have a framework in place already, and that's really great to know. I would be interested if you wanted to use the chat now too, if there are some tools that you've been using for community engagement, or if you have a framework in place and you wanted to refer to some of that, that would be amazing. So let me go back to then our community engagement process. So I mentioned that we had reached out with community conversations to reach residents. And you can see in this picture in the slide here, there were 4 questions that we went to community to ask. We asked them about what it would be like if everyone had a livable income. What are the biggest challenges people are facing when they're living in poverty? What are some of our assets or the helpful programs and services that we already have in place in Niagara? And most importantly, to inform our strategy, what do you think should be done? So we took all of that information that we gathered from community, and Rob, if you want to change the slide, they can see that image of that, the Post-it notes, thank you. And then we took all that information and we went to the research. We looked at best and promising practices, what other communities were doing to address poverty. And we used that and what we heard from community to create a draft, start to draft recommendations that we would want to include in the strategy. Then we went back to community to validate that. Did we hear you? Did we get this right? What are you thinking of these recommendations? Do they resonate with you? Do you see this working in Niagara? And we talked to over 100 content experts and lived experts to validate that data. And I'm going to turn it over to Rob to share with you a video that we created featuring one of our lived experts as she talks about the benefits of the strategy from her perspective. So Rob, if you're able to share that video, that would be great.
We are working together to prevent and end poverty and increase well-being in Niagara. Niagara's poverty reduction strategy was shaped by diverse voices in our communities, with over 1,000 individuals giving input, including those affected by poverty. We recognize that poverty is complex with no single solution, and that everyone experiences poverty differently. To help create change, we need to leverage voices of lived expertise.
So my name is Christina Thomas. I'm a lived experience resident on the committee, and I'm involved in it for helping to advocate for people in just low income situations in terms of like poverty, homelessness, and mental health. So our strategy is very empowering, again, for people who have are living and affected by all of the different services and organizations in the city. And I feel that by creating this opportunity for different departments to speak to each other, to kind of get a more broader aspect of what it means for poverty to intertwine with mental health, for mental health to intertwine with homelessness, that we can really make some good change in the way that, one, we're spending our money, and as well as how the resources are being allocated. It's one thing to do surveys or focus groups and gather some information, and then it ends there. But it's wonderful for people like me to be able to be a part of the conversation as it grows and change, to make room for the adaptations. You know, maybe we find a solution today that works for this, but tomorrow it doesn't. So it gives that flexibility, and it's very important for in any table that's making decisions on people's lives to have somebody with lived experience to say, hey, maybe this is not going to work because of this reason, or this is how it'll impact my family. It might impact that family as well. And also just come up with ideas that maybe you just generally didn't think of. I think definitely continuing to always assess and reevaluate on a regular basis where we stand. When you're in a committee that is making change, future change, you need to constantly go back and reflect on what is working, what's not working, what can we do better. And again, having people with lived experience contributing to that will really make a difference. With the strategy and all the different diverse organizations involved in our team that we get to meet with, I'm really grateful to be a part of it, because it is now an opportunity for us all to gather at the table and brainstorm and say, hey, you work in transportation. Did you know that this team member who works in housing is having similar issues, and kind of bridging those gaps? Because again, there's some systems and services that already exist, but it's people don't know what exists, they don't know how to access it, and they don't know where it is. So this is kind of bridging that gap.
Many groups, organizations, and individuals need to be involved to move this strategy forward. We invite you to join us on this journey and share your commitment to change. Together, we can end poverty in Niagara.
We are so grateful that we've had Christine's involvement within the strategy creation and now with implementation. She's been quite a champion for us, and it's really great to be able to share her voice with you in this way. Rob, if you want to get to the next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about collective impact. Lori had mentioned that in our introduction, that it's a approach that we use in community services to help us in solving complex social problems. We recognize that we need a commitment of a group of very diverse actors from different sectors to work towards a common agenda. And in our case, this is ending poverty and increasing well-being in Niagara. So throughout our presentation, you'll hear some reference to these 5 conditions of collective impact, such as backbone support that we're providing during implementation of the strategy to a local network. And if this is a framework that you're not familiar with, there are a lot of resources that come from Tamarack. I recommend you reach out to them for their training and toolkits on how to implement collective impact approach. Next slide. I also want to talk about levels of engagement. This is a starting place for us in the strategy, and we used it to help clarify the purpose of why we were engaging community, and also to communicate to participants or members of the community what they could expect through engagement, what we were trying to gather from them, and how we would use their information. So levels of engagement, this comes out of the IEP2, or the International Association of Public Participation Tools, and also from Tamarack. And it looks at there's 5 different levels of engagement. So for us in phase 1, we were looking to involve community. We wanted to hear from lived experts and those who provide services to them to identify what is needed to end poverty. So this is a great starting place when you're looking at these frameworks for community engagement, to use something like this to help you look at your purpose and how you're going to use information. And that way, when you walk into a room with people, they will know whether you're just coming to share information or whether you're actually looking to gather information to help you with decision-making, which is what we did with the strategy. Next slide. For us, it was important to engage lived experts by going to places where they typically would go for support. And this is how we were able to reach so many people. We went to these types of places that I've got listed on this slide. In total, we had 45 in-person and virtual conversations, resulting in feedback from over 600 people, representing 60 agencies. So we went to housing sites, we went to existing advisory committee meetings, network meetings, went to food banks. We actually held 5 open invitation meetings at our public libraries to reach people and had these community conversations. Next slide. We also did a survey, an online survey, and we wanted to show the details of our respondents to the survey, so you could see that we were reaching respondents who were people living in poverty in order to gather their information. Next slide. These are some of the things we heard from people. The quotes that we received, what people shared in their stories, really showed the weight of the struggle that people face when they're living in poverty. So things like what we heard, people look at you like you're worthless. We heard from a senior who talked about living in a modest home alone and having to choose between food and utilities. Another person said, I used to live a good life and now I don't feel like I'm human. Another person talked about crisis. When a crisis hits, everything's gone in a minute, and it's devastating to lose everything. So we heard over and over again about the stigma that people are facing living in poverty, and it was a key driver for us in the strategy, but looking about the role we can play in changing mindsets. Next slide. I want to talk about Indigenous engagement. We were so fortunate to have support from Mary Ellen Simon, who works at the Niagara Region Native Center. And she put out a survey and went to Indigenous events and asked a question, what do you believe is Indigenous prosperity? From those conversations, we heard some similar themes to what we heard in community conversations across Niagara about housing and mental health and addictions and transportation, but some unique themes that they talked about was self-determination, Indigenous identity, non-Indigenous relationships, spirituality, and culture. So you'll see as we share the strategy with you that we have a recommendation under Indigenous well-being, which is still very exploratory with the Indigenous community under the self-determination, where they're looking at what is needed for Indigenous prosperity in Niagara. Next slide. I talked about how after we gathered all the information from community conversations and went to the research, we went back to content experts and lived experts. This is an example of some of the external to Niagara Region content experts who we spoke with. And we held online meetings grouped by topic area like mental health and addictions or transportation. And we went to advisory committees that were existing. We invited people from community health centers, Indigenous leaders, municipal staff, existing networks, nonprofit agencies, our university, and had conversations with them to help where we shared the recommendations we had drafted. They helped us reword them, look at which ones could have the biggest impact for the least amount of effort, and help us just prioritize some of those recommendations for the strategy. Next slide. While the strategy is a community-owned strategy, but since it was spearheaded by the region, it was very important for us to show, particularly to Niagara Region Council, how the strategy aligns with existing plans and strategies across our corporation. So this is a graphic that's in the strategy report, and it shows all the different strategies such as economic development, children's services, community safety and well-being plan. And Mark and I continue to have in-depth conversations with staff who are leading these plans to make sure that we're continuing to align with this work and monitoring the successes happening and how they have an impact on our advancing our poverty reduction strategy. Next slide. This is a group that we have had the fortune of working with since the start of our creating the strategy, our steering committee. It's chaired by Lori Watson, who you met, who's moderating this panel, the Community Services Director. We have 2 regional counselors, 2 lived experts, one who you met through the video, Christina. We have 2 Indigenous leaders. We have a municipal CAO, help me out here, Chief Admin Officer. I always get lost in the acronyms. And again, we have one CAO at that table, and his role is to go to tables with the other 13 CAOs and share information about the strategy and what we can be doing to address and include what's happening within our municipalities within the strategy. And we also have community leaders whose work aligns with poverty reduction. We have 8 of them, and they are our content experts from areas such as income and employment and transportation, for example. So this group has been key to guide the creation of the strategy and to look as we move forward into implementation, to be accountable to community, to bring forward things that they're hearing in community and help us with that work. Next slide. These are some of the products that we created as part of the development of the strategy. The interim report was a way for us to take all of the community conversations, some of the quotes that I shared with you, what we were hearing from community. We put this into an interim report and shared it back to community as a way to be transparent with what we were hearing. And it's a document that we continue to refer to in terms of hearing what people were telling us in the creation and now the implementation of the strategy. We have a final report, and this is the image that you're seeing here, a cover of that report, which outlines 8 areas of focus. There's a recommendation for each of those areas of focus, and then a number, about 30 examples, actions that we can put in place to address those recommendations. Overall, we heard, Mark, I think it was like over 100 potential actions that came out of all these conversations. And in full transparency and wanting to honor all of those actions that came forward, we've included all of them on our website. And we continue to monitor in community where we hear of some of this great work that is happening, so we can continue to track that along the way. We also have a strategy at a glance, a 2-page document. So if you're limited in time and you want to see those areas of focus, there's a 2-page document to look at, which I'll share with you in a second, and that video, which we've already shared with you. The next slide is page 2 of our strategy at a glance. And so you can see the 8 areas of focus here and the recommendation tied to each one. What I love about this, this strategy at a glance page is we've also included the section of how to create change. So this also came out of all those conversations with community. They were really clear that in any area of focus, in any action that we address, we needed to address these ways to create change. So we needed to look at how we're delivering service access and coordination capacity. So this is where people talked about the difficulties of navigating the system, for example, or the benefits of peer support, continuing to leverage the voices of lived experts, incorporating DEI into all of our development and delivery of programming, looking at how the role we can play in changing mindsets, particularly to address the stigma of poverty, advocacy. So Mark talked about the importance of income, and that's a huge part of our strategy too, to look at advocacy to address income and funding. Next slide is the transition point for you. That was a lot of information. So Lori has encouraged you to use the chat. If you have questions at this point about any of this engagement pieces before we move into how we're implementing the strategy, we'll take a bit of a pause and address some of those questions.
It looks like we've answered pretty much all of the questions. There was a question about the framework and where it's at, and I think we're still in a draft format for that framework, so we're going to be sharing that with OMSSA afterwards, and then we'll make sure that's part of the information that gets shared out. All right, if no other questions, I'll get into the strategy in motion. I think we called it. If you want to go to the next slide. So after the release of the strategy in March of 2024, and throughout the development phase of the strategy, we felt it was very important that we go back to the community and show them the final product and talk about that final product. We went back to community to report on to share the report and then to get more feedback on it as well. So it's like a continuous process. So internally at the region, we looked at how the strategy aligns with the work and investments being made at the region. We looked at how we can improve policies, promote best practices, enhance program and services to strengthen effectiveness and accountability. All of those other plans that Lisa had on a previous slide that showed what else was happening at the region. So internally, we did that kind of touch base, and we continue to do that touch base. And externally, we continue to use the collective impact approach, which includes, sharing a common agenda, establishing shared measurements, which is something that we're still working on, reinforcing our activities and our connections, encouraging continuous communications, aligning and coordinating our efforts. And with that, we explored with community champions ways to best implement the actions that are listed in the strategy. And that includes those 100 actions that are listed on our website, not just the ones that were in the strategy itself. And we looked at how we could increase local capacity to implement the community work that was already happening or was needing to be happening. The poverty strategy wasn't something that was, like, oh, we weren't doing anything about poverty and now we have a poverty strategy and now we're working on poverty. We have been working on poverty for a long, long time, and community groups have been doing so for a very long time. The strategy just helps put everything in context of what everyone is doing, and also focuses in on where the gaps are. And so focusing in on what is already happening, but also what is needed to happen to address the actions that came up from our consultations and our discussions. Next slide. So momentum through promotion. As we know, promotion isn't just communication. It's how we generate energy, alignment, and shared ownership. We felt that it was extremely important that we share the strategy as widely as possible, ensuring that it doesn't just sit on a shelf somewhere collecting dust. We went out and actively engaged with community groups to promote and present the strategy. We know that the work of the strategy relies on the work of many people across Niagara. The community needs to see themselves in the strategy in order to actively participate in the work that needs to be done. So we met with over 200 people. We created an email distribution list for people to receive updates. We post updates on our website, and updates are sent out via email through an email distribution list. And the last point in here is the Invisio, which is the Niagara region as a corporation has adopted. It's a computer program that we use at the region to monitor actions that align with the work of other regional departments and groups whose plans align with the poverty reduction strategy. And I will now pass it over to Lisa to talk about measurements.
All right, we can go right to the next slide, and I'm going to share with you a little bit of information about our evaluation plan. So we identified these 4 main things that we wanted to be able to do with all of the data that we need to collect from the strategy. We want to be able to tell the story of change in Niagara. We really need to build confidence of our decision makers, such as our regional council, in how the strategy is being implemented. We want to increase our understanding of Indigenous prosperity. And we want to learn how we can improve the strategy over the years and the projects that we fund. So that's the 4 main pieces of our evaluation plan. The next slide will show you the 5 main questions that we built our evaluation around. So we ask questions of how well has the strategy met its goals? How well were funded projects put into practice? What impact did funded projects have? So at the end of the day, is anyone better off? And what can we do to improve this implementation? And then another one that our steering committee asked us to look at was what hindered success. So at the end of the day, when we go back to council and we're looking at ending poverty, which was a very large goal, we know that there's other factors that are in place. So regardless of the work that we do locally, what's happening provincially, nationally, globally right now will have an impact on that success as well. So we're tracking those types of things in our questions. The next slide gets a little bit deeper into some sample indicators. So we have a data development plan we've created with probably 100 potential indicators in there. And then we've identified some highlight measures that we're going to be focusing on in our reporting. So about, I think it was a couple months ago, OMSSA had a really great presentation from Toronto about measuring what matters. And I was really happy to see that they had looked at these, sharing some indicators, and happy to share with you some of our indicators, looking at things about how much we're doing, how well we're doing it, and ultimately, is anyone better off? So our first measure gets into how much we do in terms of the number of champions that are involved in this strategy. But the how well we're doing it is, but we're also tracking this by sector. How many of those champions come from business community, from nonprofit groups, from healthcare sector, and so on, from all these different sectors. Status of the actions named in the strategy is a quantity piece, so how much we're doing. And then we get into some of these measures of is anyone better off? And a couple here are based on income, so the support to people who are successful in completing ODSP applications leading to increased income. We have some financial empowerment work that we're doing, so we're going to track amount of money recovered through tax filing. Looking at number of domestic violence survivors and children who are able to retain permanent housing away from their abusers, and number of Indigenous youth who report positive progress with employment and mental health. So those are some of the measures that we are tracking to show the impact of the strategy. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark, and I don't know if there'll be any questions at this point if you want to take another pause. Again, feel free to use the Q&A if you have any questions about the evaluation plan.
Or in the chat. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes,
And we'll go into our oh, here we go. Was the position of poverty reduction strategy advisor already in existence before the plan was created? And the answer is no. The poverty reduction strategy advisor was created. That position was created when we started working on developing a poverty reduction strategy. Prior to that, it was myself, and then we were working with community to do that work of poverty. It was mostly the Niagara Prosperity Initiative and the funding, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And regionally owned, but community led as well. So it's a hybrid in a sense. We have the plan was created by the region, but it was from the discussion that we had from the community, and not all of the actions are done from the region. The actions are done by everyone in the community as well. So we focus on those activities that way. And the tools that we're using to track our results, Invisio is one of them. Lisa, anything else you could add to Invisio is one tool?
Yeah, so Invisio is where we're tracking all of the data. We also, with the funded sites that Mark is going to be talking about, we have data development in place with them of metrics that we're asking them to collect. So we're using just your basic Excel tool for that and the reporting. But Invisio is the main place where we're putting all of the data that we collect. And so in working with regional staff in their plans, they're reporting some of those findings directly into Invisio, and we just use their results within there. Some of the pieces that are within community, I have, we have direct meetings with, and we can track those results into the strategy. And then there's other things that are so far removed from the work that we do into community that if we're fortunate to hear about the work that is doing, then we'll track that as well and see what's happening within community. So Mark and I have a communication plan too, to be reaching out to various groups, talking about the strategy, asking people to consider their role within the strategy. And it's in those tables where we often hear about, continue to hear about this amazing work that's happening in community that we track.
I'm just trying to answer the questions I'm seeing in here. So how does the governance model support a regional owned plan led by both community and the region? Yeah, interesting. So the governance model, we have the steering committee, which Lisa talked a little bit about. And that steering committee, we had 2 regional councillors on there. We had a CAO from one of the municipalities, and then the rest were individuals from the community, so leaders from the community, people with lived experience, and so that governance model, that those individuals helped us lead and develop the plan, and continue to work on the plan in motion, in essence. Anything to add, Lisa?
Yeah, I think the other piece to it is we are in community, and community groups identify the role that they're playing within the strategy. That's where the strategy is owned by community too. So for example, we have the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network, and they have taken the strategy to leverage the work that they're doing in advocacy and changing mindsets. So it's very much aligned with the strategy, and we're very much able to provide some support to them in that work, and also then collect the data to show the impact that they're having through the poverty reduction strategy in community. So that's the part where there's pieces that are community owned as well.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about that next couple of slides. So maybe we'll go back to the presentation and we'll open it up for further questions at the end. I think we only have a few more slides to go. So okay, yeah, and so where has it where it has brought us, so, and our destination basically, right? So we have a strategy. So if you want to go to the next slide. So what is the purpose of having a poverty reduction strategy? Well, in Niagara, it helped get approval for a transit benefit pass. So prior to this, we didn't have one for low income. So one of the actions within the strategy under the transportation area of focus was to provide concession fare products for people who are living in poverty. So transit in Niagara now offers a $50 monthly pass to OW and ODSP and low income individuals. If you want to go to the next slide. And then the strategy also played a part in a call by Regional Council to increase social assistance rates. This was based on the recommendation in the strategy under income. And income is identified as an area of focus and one of the primary determinants of poverty. So the recommendation was that Niagara advocate for adequate livable rates from government income assistance programs. And a letter advocating this was sent out by council to the province. The next slide. And then, as we've been talking about, and for the 2025 to 2027 NPI funding, the Niagara Prosperity Initiative funding, which is an investment that the region makes of $1.5 million in investments to address issues of poverty in Niagara. We use the recommendations in the strategy to determine funding priorities, aligning it with community feedback and best practices. And then the funding streams were targeted for investment, came from the recommendations and the actions that are needed. And those included like Indigenous well-being, mental health and addiction, income and employment, housing and early child development, and food security. So we went through that process in 2024, at the end of 2024, and then for 2025 to 2027, 3-year grants were awarded to 7 projects, which received between 100 to 300,000 per year for up to 3 years. And then if you want to go to the next slide. And then the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network. And so this is where Lisa was saying, this is an organization, it's a network, a group of independent residents, businesses, organizations, deeply committed to wiping out poverty. They adopted the recommendations under advocacy and changing mindsets to leverage their work, which included a spring forum on basic income, film nights, presentations, and social media. So all of those things came from the Niagara Poverty Network adopting some of the elements of the strategy to help with their work. So that's where community-led it comes from. Any questions, any other questions that we haven't answered in here? I do want to finish by saying that ending poverty is something we all need to stand up for. There's a book that I really enjoyed reading. Matthew Desmond wrote a book on poverty, and he talks about poverty as being like a dream killer, a capability destroyer, a waster of human potential, right? Poverty is misery. It's a national disgrace. We need to have as a goal to end poverty, and ending poverty is achievable, but it isn't a one thing solution. You need to have many things in place to address and action on poverty. And our strategy, it's big. It's got over 100 actions. Lisa and I often joke we have our 100 actions plan that we have, but it is achievable, and if the will is there. So we'll go into the questions. Lisa, are you monitoring any?
I'm typing out a couple of responses. There's a question, if you want to take it, Mark, about the budget. So did the budget for the funding exist prior to strategy development?
Yeah, so the funding for the Niagara Prosperity Initiative came out in 2008. So Niagara's been pretty lucky. Since 2008, we've had $1.5 million available to provide programs in the community to address poverty. And Laurie, feel free to jump in at any point.
Mark, you know what, Mark, I will, and on that one just quickly, if that's okay. So as Mark noted, it is 100% regional money that is invested in that. And it is in addition to the strategy's focus as it relates to governance, is as the poverty reduction strategy strategically rests within the social assistance division. And what it has allowed us to do is advance the discussion beyond social assistance rates to talk about it in a broader sense around the impact of living in poverty. As a reporting mechanism through to Regional Council, I then have the responsibility to go back and reach into each of those different strategies as it relates to community safety and well-being, what's happening in the homelessness action plan, what's happening in that transportation plan, what's happening in the CWELC plan as an example, and report up through as all measures in moving the needle on poverty. So it creates a coordinated voice to report back up through to council, and that's part of our internal governance model that helps us to be able to do that piece. So I just wanted to, and that is then all reported in through Visio, so that the regional council can see all of the work that's happening and how it all intertwines together. Thanks, Mark.
There's a question here too about how do your internal divisions use the strategy to advance their work? So for example, housing, if there's any examples of that.
Well, I mean, a good example is the transit pass, right? So, one of the recommendations within the strategy was to do that, to have a transit pass that was affordable for people. So we did a presentation. We went to the Transit Commission actually and presented on the strategy and specifically the recommendations that were put in the strategy for transit. And so the Transit Commission heard those recommendations, and then they worked to ensure that a concession fare price was put on the tickets for OW, ODSP, and low income. And then that went to council, and then that was approved. So there's an example of how other divisions use the strategy. So it could be the housing plan, it could be DEI, it could be a number of the different divisions within the corporation that look at what work they're doing and then look at the strategy and the recommendations that are in the poverty strategy and apply that to the work that they're doing. So those are just some examples. Any other questions?
I tried to answer some of them in the chat itself. There is a question, how do you decide who qualifies for the low-income transit pass outside of the OW, ODSP? recipients.
That's a good question. Lori, did you want to take that one?
Yeah.
I know
I can
we're very happy
yeah.
about that one.
I
Yes.
can take that one actually, because I'm happy to report that it just launched July the 1st, and we have 344 individuals that have purchased a low-income transit pass. So this is actually a bolt-on to our discretionary benefits online tool, so that the back end of it is built on the policy that's used to determine eligibility for utility benefits as well as other low-income benefits. And so now there's another toggle in it where individuals go in and we do the income testing to determine whether or not they would qualify for that low-income pass. It generates a letter for them that is valid for a year, that then they take to the point of sale contact anywhere through the Niagara region to be able to purchase that. Of course, if you're on OW or ODSP, the Niagara Transit will accept the My Benefits or verification of that. This is for low income. So it truly is, as Mark said, an excellent example of how we were able to leverage this strategy across multiple parts of our organization, because we were actually able to increase our FTEs by one in order to help to administer it because of the partnership across. So that was pretty incredible. So that's how it's administered. You can go on to the Niagara Region website into the discretionary benefits, and you'd be able to see exactly how it's set up, if you're interested in taking a look at that. Thanks, Mark. I'm just doing a bit of a time check. It looks like we have about 3 minutes left. So looking for any additional questions for both Mark and Lisa would be great.
Oh, I see a question. Is there a future vision of the community safety and well-being plan and poverty reduction to become more integrated, or leave them as two separate plans? At this point, my understanding is two separate plans, but connected, right? Interconnected, integrated, put together. And then, or is the 7 funded agencies work where the cross-pollination happens? And the funded agencies actually is separate from the community safety and well-being plan. But again, interrelated in the sense that we have conversations within the department, within our within the corporation before we put out the streams of funding, and then so that gets all aligned as we do it. But two separate reports, and I don't see us linking those or creating just one report with the two, because in the one report it says you need to create a poverty reduction strategy. So we created the poverty reduction strategy as part of what the ask was in the community safety and well-being plan, and they just updated their plan. I think I have it over there, and that just came out just this month, I think, or last month. So yes. All right, looks like we're almost at time. Yeah, thank you.
So I think that turns it back over to me. Let me just see, was there anything? So we've now approached 1 o'clock. So we're going to wrap this webinar up. I'd like to thank Lisa and Mark so much for not only being here today, but Mark and Lisa for the work that you do every single day to support the most vulnerable residents here in Niagara. You are truly a pleasure to work with every day. Everyone on the call today will receive a short survey to provide feedback on this webinar. Please take a few moments to share your ideas and thoughts. I know that for many of you on this call, we have an existing working relationship with you that we very, very much value here in the Niagara region. So we would ask that you continue to reach out to us, and we can continue to learn from you as well. Thank you to OMSSA for allowing us this opportunity, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. Have a good day. Bye-bye.